Yeah, I was able to access the outline of your book
Yeah.
online, and I noticed that you mentioned the D'Arcy Concession in
Yes.
1901,
Yes.
and some of the actions taken by British oil
Yeah.
interests in the region. And I was wondering if you'd like to elaborate upon the history of the D'Arcy negotiation,
Concession. Yeah.
yeah, and the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company that emerged after that,
Yeah.
which later became the British Petroleum Company,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, um, was the holder of the largest refinery in the world.
In the in
In
Abadan. Yeah.
Okay, and I was just wondering how that impacted Kurdish nationalism
Yeah.
and the geopolitics in the region.
That's an excellent question, and thank you for raising it. Um, D'Arcy was an Australian originally, and of course a British subject. Traveled extensively, ended up in Iran and visiting the country, fascinated by its history, ancient as it is, and was in southwestern Iran, which is one of the centers of the ancient Persian civilization. Cities like Susa, Shush today. Um, there is the tomb of Daniel. It's a beautiful temple, tomb. Jewish pilgrims come there. Susa is also the ancient capital of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, the remnants of palaces and so on and so forth. So he goes to see these monuments and ruins, and he realizes children are playing, and they are throwing things on the ground. Something is running, throwing things on the ground, and it ignites with fire. And he realizes instead of water, it's oil running on the surface. And of course, you can realize that a business-minded person is. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how much oil there is? That there's oil on the surface rather than geologically exploring it. So he brings people, and he realizes, wow, this is a gold mine of petroleum. And of course, it starts from north because geologically, if you look at it, it actually starts on the southern regions of the Kurdish populated regions, and then it comes south all the way to the mouth of the Persian Gulf. And he wants a concession, and this is of course early 20th century. The Iranian government is bankrupt, run by the most incompetent, the most managerially embarrassing sort of government Iran has ever had. And so he provides what it can only be called a bribe to the Shah at the time, that he will give him an annual income. And of course, the Shah loves it because a check in sterling pound, British sterling pound is going to be nice. He gives a check to the prime minister, and he gives a check to the so-called minister of engineering and development, which is basically the equivalent of secretary for interior. And so he gets a concession. That concession, believe it or not, was for 60 years, 60. That is in return for three bribes. He can you imagine?
It's a real good deal.
Billions of dollars worth of oil, and this shows where the Middle East is at the time, and how behind and how uninformed uh, the ruling elite is. At any rate, D'Arcy buys this, and of course the British realize, this is a gold mine. And starting in 1907, 1908, after the St. Petersburg Convention, the British, looking at the Germans, are realizing there has to be some real changes in their military technology. And one of them, as far as the British Navy is concerned, is to convert from coal to oil. This is a big, big decision on the part of the British. And they're looking, therefore, for possibilities of sources for petroleum. And of course, they realize D'Arcy, and here it is. he is telling them there is oil running underground and so on and so forth. So what they do in 1909 is they buy 51% of the shares, and they create what came to be known as the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later renamed Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, later renamed BP, British Petroleum. They buy the lion's share, and it became right away it became the most profitable economic venture in the entire British economy. It was millions of dollars, but because they had this 60-year contract, basically concession, they didn't feel they needed to give any money to the Iranian government, and it became the source of a great deal of anger and dissatisfaction. And of course, from that money, they could run the entire Iranian government, because they could buy the favors of chiefs, Kurdish chiefs, southwestern Iran, Bakhtiyari chiefs, landlords, and maintain a navy. And of course, by 1912, they built what you correctly said, the largest oil refinery in the world. And that's at Abadan. And it stayed until 1980 when Saddam Hussein destroyed it. It has been rebuilt to a large degree, but I have visited Abadan several times. The British staff who ran the oil refinery built one of the most modern cities in Iran. Abadan was built on the basis of a British urban plan. The first time I went there, I was a very young guy. I was in elementary school, in fact, when I went to Abadan. And to tell you a distance, it takes 2 years by 2 days by train to get there, a day and a half at least. And by the time you get to Abadan, it's at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, much warmer than Tehran. Tehran mountainous, cold. And there you have palm trees. It's like Florida almost. And beautiful city. They had a very colonial when you go there, you have polo fields, you have swimming pools, you have tennis courts, all sorts of things. And all the houses, instead of the ancient Persian architecture of alleys and, narrow streets, all the houses are numbered and so on and so forth. Very nicely built, actually. Abadan is, I don't know what happened to it after the war. It was probably devastated by the Iraqis, but the city was just beautiful. Shopping centers, a Jewish population, a Christian population, majority Persian-speaking Iranian population. But that was the oil refinery, and a lot of Iranians worked there. In 1951, under a nationalist government by Mohammad Mossadegh, Iran tried to take over the refinery. They did. They actually expelled the British from Abadan. But then after 1953, when Mossadegh was overthrown, the oil refinery was reorganized, this time under Iranians, with a lot of help from the Eisenhower administration. And Iran signed a new oil agreement with a consortium. So 40% of the oil was sold to U.S. oil companies, Mobil, Texaco, and so on and so forth. Another 40% to British Petroleum. The remaining 20%, because of antitrust laws in this country, was divided. Dutch Shell, French oil companies, and so on. To contextualize, the British were not willing to help Simcoe in any realistic fashion. Why? Because they wanted to keep Iran as a unified nation. The territorial integrity of Iran was very important because of their oil interest. And Simcoe undermining that, and also negotiating in the back with Ataturk in Turkey and the Bolsheviks. Remember, we were not a friend of Turkey for a long time because Ataturk himself was receiving arms from the Soviets and being in touch with the Bolsheviks. Can you imagine northwestern Iran going in such close proximity to the British in southwestern Iran and the oil fields, they could not afford allowing a Kurdish nationalist creating a Kurdish state within Iran and threatening their economic interests. Remember also, please, that India did not gain its independence until August of 1947. Any foothold on that Persian Gulf would have meant threatening British interest in India.
Right.
And for them, Abadan, the oil fields, and India were hand in hand in terms of the British interest in the region.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great game, you know,
exactly.
the British and the access to India, it was so central.